Welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're taking a look at Pakistan's incredible High-Wire Act. You've got a country being pulled in two totally different directions by conflicts escalating right on its borders. One wrong step and the consequences could be huge.
You know, a recent analysis in Dawn newspaper just summed it up perfectly with this quote. I mean, just picture it, walking a tightrope over a raging sea. That's pretty much Pakistan's foreign policy at this very moment. It's a high-stakes balancing act with basically zero room for error. So let's take a look at the forces trying to knock it off that rope.
Okay, let's dive right in. The whole challenge really boils down to two major crises happening at the same time, and each one is yanking Pakistan's foreign policy in a different direction. You've got a hot war brewing in the Gulf on one side, and then a really tense standoff with Afghanistan on the other. So first up, let's talk about the dilemma in the Gulf. For Pakistan, this isn't some distant conflict you just watch on the news. No, this is a direct test of its most critical alliances, and it's forcing the country to face some of its biggest vulnerabilities head-on. And here's where it gets really tricky. On the one hand, Pakistan has a brand new, binding defense pact with its very close ally Saudi Arabia. But on the other hand, it shares a long, complicated border with Iran, a seriously powerful neighbor that has a lot of supporters inside Pakistan. See the problem? And this is where the pressure just absolutely builds. I mean, look at these factors. You got a weak national economy, which makes Pakistan really dependent on Gulf oil. That pulls it towards Saudi Arabia. But at the exact same time, there's strong pro-Iran sentiment at home, plus the very real risk of the conflict spilling over into its Balochistan province. That pulls it in the complete opposite direction. Every single option is loaded with risk.
And trying to just, play both sides, that's a massive gamble. The analyst warns that a subtle wink and nod policy just isn't going to fly with Iran. The source makes it clear. They tend to see the world in black and white. You're either with them or you're against them. There's not much room in between.
Okay, now as if all of that wasn't complicated enough, let's pivot to the second major crisis that's making this all so much harder. The growing confrontation with the Taliban in Afghanistan, happening right on Pakistan's western border.
What's interesting is that the analysis points out that while the Gulf crisis is grabbing all the headlines, the showdown on the western border has been dangerously overlooked. But just because it's out of the spotlight doesn't make it any less critical for Pakistan's future.
And this gets us to a really fundamental question that the analyst raises. Is Pakistan's recent hard line against the Taliban just a temporary change of mind, a short-term tactic to get them to stop supporting terrorists, or is this a permanent shift in policy? A total strategic pivot away from decades of its entire approach to Afghanistan. The implications of that choice are just massive.
Right, and this really gets to the core of that potential policy shift. Is Pakistan actually looking for new allies inside Afghanistan? The source mentions speculation that the country might be moving away from its historical focus on Pakhtun groups, which, if true, would be a monumental change in its entire regional strategy. So, faced with these two enormous, nation-defining challenges, the analyst doesn't just lay out the problems. They also point towards a possible way to actually find a solution.
Well, the argument here is that these decisions are just too big, too important to be made behind closed doors. So what's the proposed solution? Take the debate public. Hold it in a joint session of Parliament.
And this slide really shows you why Parliament is the suggested place to do it. It's pretty much the only forum that can bring all these necessary and often competing voices to the same table. You get the major national parties, sure, but you also get crucial representatives from the border provinces like Balochistan and KP, along with both nationalist and religious parties. Every perspective gets a hearing.
The goal isn't just to talk for the sake of talking. It's about trying to build a real national consensus. The hope, really, is that through an open, transparent conversation, what the source calls sane advice can finally cut through all the political noise and guide the country toward a more stable, unified path.
Okay, so we've broken down the two crises, we've talked about the call for a national debate, so what's the bottom line here? What's the recommended path forward for Pakistan at this incredibly critical crossroads?
When it comes to Afghanistan, the analysts suggest a path of, strategic patience and non-intervention. The argument is that Pakistan's interests are actually best served not by trying to pick winners and losers, but by engaging with whatever government is in power, through cooperation on security, on trade, on economics. And here is the key warning. Look, taking firm action against terrorism is one thing, but a sudden, radical shift in your entire strategy, Well, that's a huge gamble. It risks shattering an already fragile relationship with its neighbor, creating a trust deficit that could be dangerously destabilizing in the long run. And so, we'll leave you with the central question this analysis really poses. In a region that is just filled with conflict and incredibly high-stakes decisions, can an open, democratic debate truly influence state policy and guide a nation that is, as the source said at the beginning, walking on a very, very perilous tightrope?